Okay, now each piece like this is an interlocking unit. So this is the front part, the anterior part, and this is the part behind which you feel at the back. So you have two interlocking pieces, and if you see the same thing from here, this is how it is. The part which is towards the inside of the body is called the body, and this is called the arch, vertebral arch, because it's like somewhat like an arch, and the spinal nerves will pass through that canal. Okay, and so the round one, the elliptical one, is called the body of the vertebra, and this one is called the arch, and it's not a single piece, so it is two pieces which are attached by what is called a pedicle. If you see the figure below this, more schematic picture, can you see that pedicle which they have marked with the arrow?
Yes, ma'am.
So the pedicle is the one which attaches the body, vertebral body. Ali Nodi, just see this diagram, it's really clear. So this is your vertebral body, and then the posterior part, the back part, is what we call the arch of the vertebra. The arch is also made up of different parts. The C shape, that arch shape, is called the lamina. Then you have two horizontal processes, transverse processes they are called. And then you have a spinous process at the back, like a horn. And the body of the vertebra is attached to the arch of the vertebra by the pedicle. And between one and the other, like I said yesterday, they are stacked also one on top of the other. So in between you have this intervertebral disc. Can you see that in the picture? Now the intervertebral disc is soft tissue. Okay, so the disc is soft tissue, it can be compressed. Okay, and then also we'll see the diagrams and then we'll start this thing. Now if you see the picture from the previous picture, see the anterior longitudinal ligament. He is showing very clearly from various angles. So you see this anterior longitudinal ligament, so this is a soft tissue. Then you have a posterior longitudinal ligament. Now the same thing if you see in the figure B, this is how the anterior just see where I am pointing. So this is your whole anterior longitudinal ligament. And then this is the whole, where is the posterior longitudinal? The posterior is here. Posterior longitudinal, thin strip of soft tissue. So the anterior and the posterior longitudinal ligaments are important because they are responsible for that tensile stretching, forward bending and back bending. These ligaments will play an important part. And you have these various spinous processes like the horns, no? They are attached to the vertebrae on top and below by various other ligaments called supraspinous, interspinous. So these are the ligaments by which each disc and vertebra is attached to the top one. So that through various ligaments. Ligaments are soft tissues. Okay. And you have this soft tissue here also right in the middle. This is called the nucleus of the body of the vertebra. The nucleus pulposus and the annulus fibrosus. It's an interesting chapter, you can remember. Okay, so we start the chapter. Spinal column as a whole is ideally constructed to neutralize combination of compressive and tensile forces to which it is constantly subjected by gravity and movement. So the main function of the spinal column is to balance the load that the body takes every day. The body is subject to stretching and compression every day, and the spinal cord keeps the body framework healthy. Okay, and it is constantly, how many number is 24. bound to each other with intervening zones of cartilaginous disc. Now it's actually 24 plus 5, 29, and 29 plus 5, so 7 plus 12 is 19, 19 plus 5, 24 plus 5, 29, 29 plus another 5, 34, yes. Now the end of the vertebral column is all fused, and it doesn't have this kind of stretching and compressive action as the rest of the top part of the spinal cord. So in this chapter, it's not of too much importance. Sacral and that coccyx, they are all fused bones. There is no disc in between. There is no, that soft spongy disc is not there. So most of the stretching and the compression comes from the cervical part and then the thoracic chest area and the lumbar region, lower back. The rest 10 are fused. Okay, now these 24 vertebrae are bound to each other with intervening zones of cartilaginous discs. So this is called a disc. Okay, cartilaginous disc, capsular joints and spinal ligaments. These alternation of bony and soft tissue structures. So what the yoga connection to this is, wherever you see the bony parts, that represents stability. So obviously bones cannot move. Whereas it is the soft tissues, the joints, the capsules, the ligaments, these are the ones that will help the backbone to stretch and compress. So it is a very nice harmony between stability and immobility and movement, which is caused by the soft tissues in the spinal column. So stability in yoga is called sthira, and movement and flexibility is called sukha. So you can see the interplay of balance between stability and movement in the spinal column itself. So the stability is provided by the bones, the bony parts, and the movement, tensile and shear force and compressive force is provided by the soft tissues. That is the joint, capsule, the ligaments, which provide the sukha aspect of this whole network, of this whole the system, framework. Okay. Now the intrinsic equilibrium of the spinal column can be found in the integration. So the bony parts interact with the soft parts to balance forces that the body is subjected to daily. To understand the overall architecture of the spine, it is useful. So even though we think of the spine as just one solid block, it is actually two pieces which are joined. So that is how they will describe it in this chapter also. As the front part, that is the part which is facing the body, inside of the body. So that is called the anterior part. Each vertebra has an anterior part, and then this is the posterior part. And that is how it will be. The chapter will deal with the chapter in this manner. Can be roughly divided in half between a column of vertebral bodies. So this whole thing now, from top to bottom, is a column of vertebral bodies, and this whole thing here is a column of arches. The anterior column of the vertebral bodies, we are not talking about this. The anterior column deals with weight-bearing compressive forces. Okay, whenever somebody gives you a knock on the head, the weight of the body is taken up by the anterior column of the vertebral column of the spinal vertebra. And then if there is any stretching that is going on, that is taken up by the posterior column. Functionally, this arrangement very clearly evolved to contend with the dual requirements of stability and plasticity. So if you had only one of the two, suppose you had only stability, then you cannot even bend forward or you cannot even stretch. Similarly, if it was only about flexibility in the spine, then there would be no support. Yeah, you could just collapse. or you could be too. So that's another thing. Students who are over flexible, actually the teachers have to be more careful. If the student is somewhat stiff, usually people who come to a yoga class are stiff to begin with. So it's an advantage because you have a lot of, you can work and play, mold them very easily. But a person who is already hyperextensible, you have to take care that they don't injure themselves because they will want to keep stretching. Okay, so so the stability part is provided by the anterior column, the whole from top to bottom, and the flexibility or the elasticity is provided by the posterior column. And anterior column therefore is subjected to compressive forces. The compressive forces are taken up by the anterior column and the tensile stretches are taken up by the posterior column. That you have to remember. Anterior column of the spinal cord takes up compressive forces. ನಾನು ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನೋಡಿ. When I study, I just mark it. So I put compressive here and I put an arrow pointing down. So I know when I read it that force is going there. Now for the posterior column, tensile with an upward arrow. Stretching, yes. So illu ನೀವು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಥಿರ ಸುಖ interplay ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. So sthira sukha is going on, the balance between stability and flexibility is going on between the anterior column and the posterior column, as well as between the bony parts and the soft parts of the, so there is two way. So a question could be asked, please give an example or illustrate how balance sthira and sukha applies to the spinal column. So two factors are there between the anterior column and the posterior column, and between the bony parts and the soft parts of the spinal column. And you can underline in that second paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth line, stability and plasticity are the two functions of the spinal column. So the anterior column deals with weight bearing, compressive forces, yes. Posterior column of arches deals with tensile forces. Also you can understand by the way each vertebra is structured. So anything which is a solid, now the anterior part of the vertebra is like almost like a solid piece. So it bears load. Whereas the arch is hollow, right? So it will allow for flexibility and movement, stretch. The next paragraph, the vertebral bodies transmit compressive forces to the disc, okay, which resist compression by pushing back. Now what happens here is, this compressive force, it will fall on the body of the vertebra. This is called the body of the vertebra. The weight falls here and this will put pressure on the disc. And the disc is like a spring, it will bring it back to it will bring the vertebral body back to its original height. So otherwise what will happen is, friction will occur between the top and bottom, and that will lead to a lot of pain. Now that's what happens in your slip disc cases when they have lower back pain. This capsule slips out and therefore there is friction between the bony parts and that leads to the pain. So that is your slip disc. Okay.
Mostly it acts like a cartilage in the knee.
Correct, exactly. So it's like lubrication. You can think of it as a cushion, as a firm cushion. Okay, it is a firm cushion because when force is applied, the cushion will spring back. It's like a coiled spring with potential energy. Okay. The column of arches. So now coming to the posterior part, which is the arch part of the vertebra. The column of arches transmits tension forces to all the attached ligaments, which resist stretching by pulling back. Now in this posterior part, the opposite takes place. Stretching occurs, but what these ligaments do is, they make sure that you are not overstretching by pulling back together. Okay, so when you are doing your back extension, standing and lifting your arms and bending back, the arches move away from each other but they are held in tension by these ligaments. Okay? In short, the structural elements of the spinal column are involved in an intricate dance that protects the central nervous system by neutralizing the forces of tension and compression. So your key words will be Sthira, Sukha, Haudu. So you see now, interestingly, Sthira and Sukha may seem like opposites, but they actually are dependent on each other. Sthira is stability and Sukha is flexibility and movement. So you need to have the balance between the two. So usually they say a flexible person is a weak person and a strong person is a stiff person. But it's actually, you cannot have one without the other. Okay? So Sthira Sukha, then you have, so because of Sthira is brought about by the vertebral body. And Sukha is brought about by the vertebral arch. Then Sthira is associated with compression, compressive forces. And Sukha is tensile forces. Also, Sthira is anterior column of the spinal cord. And Sukha is posterior column of spinal cord. And both are interdependent. And also you will see Sthira and Sukha within the vertebral body itself. Within this part itself you will see Sthira and Sukha. So one more, this thing is, now if you see the vertebral body from top, if you take a cross section, and you have like this concentric fibers. Okay, so I am now talking about only this anterior part, one piece. Okay, now this is how it is. This you have the page 34. That's the diagram. First diagram on page 34. You have fibrous rings. Okay, so the tissues are arranged like this in a ring form. And in the center, it's called the nucleus pulposus. Now this nucleus pulposus is tightly bound by the annulus fibrosus, which contains concentric rings of oblique fibers that alternate their direction in a manner similar to that of internal and external obliques of the abdominis. Okay, so the direction of fibers of this is, it's kind of like how they are shown in the picture. It goes like this. Yeah. So what happens here is also the tough fibrous layers of the annulus fibrosus tightly enclose the soft. So this is the soft part here, and this is the annulus is the tough part, annulus. So here also you have the interplay of Sthira and Sukha. Stability is provided by the annulus, and the flexibility and movement is provided by the nucleus of the vertebral body. And along with that, this itself, the whole vertebral body itself is bound here by the anterior posterior ligament and anterior longitudinal ligament and posterior longitudinal ligament. So like this you have several. And in between you have this disc, soft disc. So this tightly contained arrangement results in a strong tendency for the nucleus to always return to the center of the disc no matter in which direction the body's movement propels it. So this outer concentric layer keeps the nucleus in check. Okay, so this is the one which provides the stability for the nucleus of this vertebral body. So here also you have the interplay between stira and sukha. Stira provided by the annulus fibrosus. Of vertebral body. And movement and flexibility is provided by the nucleus pulposus. Yeah. Okay. And then you can see what happens in weight-bearing activities. So, figure A is weight-bearing forces as well as in B, twisting forces produce symmetric compression of the nucleus. So, when weight is put or twisting force is applied, this nucleus is under pressure. Okay, so it leads to flattening of the nucleus, which under pressure from the annulus comes back to its original shape. Okay, so when compressive force is applied or twisting is applied, the nucleus will become flat, but because of the pressure from the annulus, it will come back to its original thickness. So that is figure A. Weight-bearing forces and twisting produces compression or flattening of the nucleus, which under pressure from the annulus fibers returns to its spherical shape, thus decompressing the vertebrae. And then figure 2 is weight-bearing forces as well as twisting produces symmetrical compression, same thing. He has just repeated the picture, I think. Which under pressure from annulus, same thing. Okay, then weight-bearing activities in general as well as axial rotation, twisting movements produce symmetrical compressive forces that flatten the nucleus into the annulus, same thing is saying, which pushes back. So the annulus fibers will push back the nucleus from its flattened state to its full height, resulting in a decompressive reaction. Any doubts here? I think it's quite clear. Yeah. We are talking in this regard of annulus and nucleus, only we are talking about the anterior part of this vertebral column. There is still the posterior part, which is the arch part. We are only talking about the compressive forces and the twisting forces which are applied, which causes flattening and then pulling back by the fibers to get the original health of the nucleus. Okay. Now, if the compressive force is high enough, rather than rupture, the nucleus. So next page, Nodi, 35, page 35. What happens is, if there is lot of compressive force, rupture will not take place. Nucleus will not rupture. Why? Because it has some water content. Okay. The nucleus loses some of its moisture if it is over compressed. It loses some of its moisture to the porous bone of the vertebral body. Now this nucleus that we are talking about, it is spongy and moist. If too much compression takes place, it will not rupture. The moisture will seep into the bone. Okay, and once that compressive force is taken out, once the load is taken out, the nucleus will absorb the moisture back from the bone, and therefore that's why when you get up from sleep, you are a little taller. That's what he says. Because during the day you are subjected to a lot of force for various reasons. The spine takes load, lifting weights and walking and everything. So the nucleus loses moisture, which it regains during sleep. So which is another reason why rest is important. Yeah. When the weight is taken off the spine, the hydrophilic, so you can underline hydrophilic, you know that, I think most of you know hydrophilic, hydrophobic you know, right? So hydrophilic nucleus draws the water back in and the disc returns to its original thickness. That is why humans are a bit taller right after getting out of bed. Okay, just see the picture, let's see what he's trying to explain. Flexion. So flexion, you know, I don't know if you know, flexion means forward bending. Flexor. Yes.
There's a line in page 33, the last one.
Okay.
The namaste process is itself contained front and back by the anterior.
Yes.
What is it? I do not understand.
I showed him. This annulus fibrosus is this, no? Front में you have anterior longitudinal and back you have posterior longitudinal. They are ligaments. Posterior. So you see everything is nicely, you know, boundaries are so well defined.
Yeah.
Nothing can go out of place. And it is important that nothing goes out of place. Okay.
So intelligently.
It's amazing, no? Yeah. Okay, page 35, diagram. Okay, two terms that you will come across, we have to do those terms also, I should have done it. Flexion and extension. Now, very roughly, flexion means forward bends. Okay, now don't take it to be like the Bible. Okay, don't hold me to it. And don't say she said there. In some future yoga class that you attend where a teacher would have said something and then she will come back and ask me. Now, it's very vague, it's very, very relative, subjective. But generally, flexion means forward bending. Means when two surfaces come towards each other, it is called flexion. When the angle reduces. It can be your upper body coming towards your lower body. Angle of the body reduces. Extension means when my upper body moves away from my lower body, angle increases, no? Becomes obtuse angle. More than, so that is called extension. But again, I am saying very subjective. In this chapter itself, you will see how you cannot call all forward bends as flexion and you cannot call all back bends as extensions. It depends on how the student does the posture. Okay, so I'll just go on to what that means. Now, if a person is not very flexible, say, okay, a very stiff sedentary person, okay, call him a male. So we're supposed to be gender neutral here, but let's just, okay. So a male, if I say stand and raise your arms and then bend back or extend or something, what he'll try to do is, he cannot lift his upper back because usually upper back is quite stiff. So what he'll try to do, he will try to go back from his hip. But what is he doing in that case? He's compressing or he's flexing his lower back, he's pinching his lower back. So actually, even though it's called a back bend, he is not doing a back extension, he is doing a flexion of his lower back, he is compressing there. So that's why even though when you look at him from space, if you see him, it will look as if he is doing a back extension, but actually his lumbar spine, lower back is getting flexed. Okay, so that is one case, and then this other case, this picture, so you can see it on page 41. This is a stiff sedentary person trying to do a back extension. Page 41, figure A. Okay, so unfortunately it's the software engineer who is, yoga nali, they are the scapegoats. Okay, we use them for a lot of examples. Okay, so just like I'm sure software engineers also make fun of us. Okay, so it goes the other way around also. So this guy, the poor guy is stiff. He cannot actually back bend, so back extension requires a lot of flexibility in your upper back region, thoracic chest area. But if you don't have that flexibility, then you will start bending from your lower back, and that leads to injuries. So how do you know what he is doing? Because see how his hips are, he is thrusting his hips forward. But actually his chest is not lifting. His upper back is remaining almost the same as nothing is happening there.
Yeah.
So even though it is a back bend, he is actually doing flexion of lumbar spine. So this is a false back bend or a false back extension. And in my classes, I prefer not to say bend backwards. I just keep saying extend. Because the language that you use, it makes a lot of difference to your students. When you say bend backwards, for my stiff student, he will start doing that only, what he is not supposed to do. Instead, if I say extend, he will try to at least try to stretch his chest, lift his chest. Okay, so this is a false back extension or a back bend, and this is a false forward bend. Because what is she doing now? This is another one, a very flexible dancer. She is trying to do a forward bend, but actually she is stretching her upper back nicely. She is actually doing an extension of the thoracic spine. So this is also a false forward bend. Nothing wrong with this. Certain Surya Namaskars where we suppose some days that you want to do back extensions, this is a good way to prepare. But if you have a stiff person, you better be little careful how they are doing it. This is see how her upper back is just above, see on the back side of her chest, upper back thoracic spine is nice and long. Whereas if I ask this guy to do this, how would it look? Andre, it would look like this. His upper back would become like a camel hump tara, and then he will struggle to stretch his arms. He will be like this. So that's what you have to be aware of. Okay. Yeah, so it says, no, the figure 41, flexion, he is doing flexion moving backward in space, and the dancer is doing extension moving forward in space. So, like I said, flexion is when two surfaces come closer to each other. Now, if I am doing this, I am doing flexion of my bicep. Okay, and extension would be like this. To the lower arm moving away from the upper arm is extension, and this is flexion. Okay. Yes. Coming to page 35, movement of flexion, extension and lateral flexion produces asymmetric movement. So let us see what's going on here. In the diagram, flexion and extension movements produce asymmetric movements of the nucleus, which under pressure from the annulus returns. So again we are coming back to the nucleus and the annulus. The annulus provides the stability for the compression and the twist and torque which the nucleus is subjected to. Okay. Okay. Come to the next paragraph, that is also important. What the work of the anterior and the posterior longitudinal ligaments. Okay. The anterior longitudinal ligament runs all the way from the upper front of the sacrum to the front of the occipital. Occipital is at the back of the head. So this anterior longitudinal ligament here, which you see here in this picture, it goes all the way from the bottom, from your pubic region, all the way to the head, back of the head. Okay. Now this anterior longitudinal ligament will be stretched during backward bending. Please listen carefully. This ligament will be stretched during your back extensions. And not only does it tend to spring the body back to neutral, but increases tension at its attachment to the disc, also helps to propel the nucleus back. So when you're doing your back bend, this ligament will keep your stretch safe when you're lifting like that. And the opposite action occurs in the posterior longitudinal ligament when it is stretched in a forward bend. When you do your forward bending and try to touch your toes, this posterior ligament will try to pull you back into a safer forward bend. You understand? So, anterior longitudinal ligament will come into action when you do your back extensions. And posterior longitudinal ligament is important during forward bends. Yes, please underline that, it's important. So, which one to underline? The anterior longitudinal ligament.
Stretched during
yes,
backward
when it is stretched, yes, correct. When it is stretched during backward bending, not only does it tend to spring the body back to neutral, but increases tension at the attachment to the disc, also helps to propel the nucleus back to neutral. Then next line also important. Posterior longitudinal ligament, when it is stretched in a forward bend, opposite action, yes, tension, it brings tension and brings the nucleus back to neutral. So these two ligaments are also important to keep your discs and discs in place during back bends and forward bends. Every movement that produces disc compression in anterior column necessarily results in tension to the corresponding ligaments as attached to the posterior column. Okay. So whenever there is compression in front, you have tension at the back, at the arch. So this is very roughly the shape of your arch. Okay. Transverse processes, amele hinde you have that spinous process something. Okay. Next one. Okay, and then on page 36 he says on the top of the page, all this activity occurs in tissues that behave independently of the circulatory, muscular, voluntary nervous systems. So all this is going on in your spinal column, which is independent of nervous control, circulatory or muscular. Means, what is he trying to say? The spinal column it can act on its own. It doesn't really require nervous control or muscular control or any other extra commands. Just by this system and by this arrangement, it will take care of itself. Okay. In other words, their actions do not impose an energy demand on other systems. Which is why we keep talking about spine in yoga. Because it has a mind and intelligence also of its own. It can support the body without any other body parts. If you had only that itself will function. That skeleton itself will work. It's so beautifully designed. Now, what are the types of spinal movements? 5.5. You have forward bend, which is called flexion. Then you have back extension. Then you have twisting, axial rotation. And then you have lateral flexion, side bending. And these four movements occur more or less spontaneously in the course of daily life. example of flexion is to tie your shoes, you bend. Then extension example is you are reaching for something on a high shelf. Then axial rotation, twisting. You want to grab something behind you in the car, so you have to do a twist. Then you reach your arm into the sleeve of an overcoat, lateral flexion. Okay. Imagine your sleeve is far below or something. So then you have to really stretch the other side. Yeah. These are of course yoga postures that there are yoga postures that emphasize these movements. Okay. Okay. So each part of your spinal column has different degrees of flexibility. Okay. Now your neck region of the spinal column, you can stretch it by 75%. You can extend by 75 degrees. Sorry, not percent. Cervical part. But you can only fold by 40 degree. So total range of movement is 115 degree. You can stretch your neck to 75 degree extension for back bend.
Extension means back.
Yes, bending backwards or upwards and backwards basically. But forward bend of the neck only 40 degree. So total 75 plus 40, 115. Then in the chest area, thoracic region, you can extend very stiff, okay, so only 25 degree you can extend. But bending you can do more, 45 degree. So total is 70. Then in the lower back, of course, you can extend by 35. Not much of back bend, but forward bend you can do well, so 60 degree. And total is 95 degree. Okay, lumbar regionally forward bend you can do more, but that is the one which is misused the most. Because we can have a 90 degree flexion in the lower back, we keep pulling ourselves down. When you say forward bend, you keep doing that, and then you have to be careful when you bend forward from the lower back. So totally, if you see, the most flexible part of the spine would be your cervical, neck. Then next would be your lumbar. And if you see, those are the two most delicate, prone to injury. Cervical spondylosis and then slip disc, all that happens in the lower back only. You rarely hear of any injury in your upper back. And like that, you have different degrees for twisting also. Which part of the spine can twist more? So maximum twisting you can do in neck region. Yeah, this is on page 37. Cervical region has maximum capacity to twist. Then you have the thoracic 35. Lumbar you cannot twist from the lower back. So please keep that in mind. Don't use your lower back to do a twisting pose. The twisting has to come from the hip area. It is more stable in the hip, no? Lower back cannot turn. And then page 38, more thorough look into the nature of the four ranges of motion of the spine shows that there is a fifth movement also, but it is not a very natural one. It requires more of practice, advanced practice, which is called axial extension. You will see that at the end of the chapter. Okay. Okay, now coming to another important concept, primary and secondary curve. Inhalation, how breath is also linked to your spine. 5.7 on page 39. This is also important. The most basic movement of the spine emphasizes its primary curve, flexion. Now the natural tendency of the spine is to curve, convexity. Because when we are in the mother's womb, the spine is like this. So the baby is curled up like that, and that's how it arrives. So this whole thing is called the primary curve of the spine. Later only, after the baby is born, does the neck cervical spine and then the lumbar spine, all that. Only later does it become like this. When it is born, it is just one C. So this is called the primary curve. So that's why when we do child's pose, your back is kind of rounded. So that's why it's called child's pose, because it gives lot of comfort. And also when we come out of Shavasana, you turn to one side and you create this shape and then you slowly come up. So that's the best way to come up. So this is called the primary curve. Also in Shavasana, when you are lying on your back, if you notice carefully next time you do Shavasana or Yoga Nidra, some parts of the body will not be in contact with the mat. So the parts, the areas, you can shade those areas, like how he has shaded. Those are the areas which are in contact, those are called the primary curves. For example, the back of your head touches the mat, so it's a primary curve. Then your shoulder blades, they will touch. Then your bum will touch, your calf muscles will touch, your heels will touch. All those form the primary curves. The parts which do not touch the mat are called the secondary curves. And the secondary curves develop after birth. That's why when the baby is born, no, you have to support the neck, right? Always you have to hold it like this till the baby is around 3 months. Yeah, so that neck support, yes. So because there is no neck there, I mean the spine is not developed there, it develops only later. It's very weak at that stage. Okay, so if you see the baby, it's just 2 lumps, one head and one trunk, that's it. And 2 limbs, that's it. The neck comes later. Okay, so primary curves are the grey shaded areas. And that picture, the one before that is your child's pose, Balasana. Child's pose replicates the primary curve of the unborn child. So definition would be, what is primary curve definition? So you can say all curves of the body that are posteriorly convex. Posterior means the back side of the body. Okay, so all the parts of the body in Shavasana which are on the mat when you are in Shavasana, that is posterior part. The part of the body which is facing the ceiling is the anterior part. Then anything which is towards the crown of the head is called superior. Anything towards the feet is called inferior. So at least these 4 terms, if you are familiar with today, it will help. So posterior, and these you will use, I hope you will use in a yoga class. Posterior, anterior, superior, inferior. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು 2 ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, medial and lateral. Yes, Maula, medial ಏನು, lateral ಏನು?
Medial is the center of the axis of the body.
Yes, yes.
And lateral is away from the medial.
Correct. So anything towards the midline of your body is medial. Anything away from the midline is lateral.
Lateral.
Yeah. And then one more term you have which is called axial. Axial is again everything along the midline. Appendicular means everything, the limbs. Our 4 limbs are called appendages. They are arising from the, from the torso, from the trunk. Yeah.
Of the body.
And then 2 more terms will be supine. Supine means you are lying down on your back. Prone means you are lying down on the stomach. So these you need to better to familiarize. Posterior, anterior, supine is, can anybody name a supine posture? Shavasana is a supine posture. You are lying on your back. Prone?
Standing.
No, not standing.
Crocodile is also.
Yes, yes. Bhujangasana is a prone
Bhujanga.
posture. Cobra. You know that Dhanurasana, no? Bow pose.
Bow
where you
position.
hold your feet and you
Yeah.
lift the bow like that. You're doing it from your belly, you're lifting from the belly, holding.
Yeah.
So that is also a prone pose. Crocodile also is a prone pose. Supine is Shavasana. So medial is towards the midline, lateral is away from the midline. Okay. So, coming back to primary curves and secondary curves. A simple way to identify all primary curves is to notice all parts of the body that are in contact with the floor in Shavasana. So next time tomorrow when you do Yoga Nidra, just notice your contact areas. That appendicular is 4 limbs. See, basically our body is one block, but there are 4 extensions. So if you think of this is your axial body. Axial body and appendicular body. This is the trunk. So axial and appendicular is 1, 2, 3 and 4. 4 appendages. So he has already told you the curve of the back of the head, the upper back, the sacrum, and sacrum is just above your tailbone. If you just go home and check where your tailbone is, just one finger, one small prominence you see, between the buttons, that is your tailbone. Just above that is the sacrum, which is made up of fused bones. So that is your sacrum, which is also a primary curve. And the backs of the thighs, the calves and the heels, these are all primary curves. Consequently, the secondary curves are present in all body parts. Leave letter. Secondary curves are present, ask Papa to write. Okay. Are present in all body parts that are off the floor in this position. The cervical and lumbar. So lower back you can feel it arching when you lie down in Shavasana. So that you need to adjust when you lie down. So try to make it straight. If you have after doing asana practice, if you feel it is too much arching, then you can support with a cushion. So lumbar support if you give in Shavasana, this will nicely relax and straighten out the spine naturally. And then when you get up after Shavasana, you will not feel, oh God, my lower back is pulling. So that bedsheet, that Jamkarnatara, you just fold it comfortably as much and then slide it under so that it will compensate for that gap. And similarly, people feel it at the back of the neck also. If they cannot straighten that area in Shavasana. That's why in Shavasana, I don't know if you noticed 2 classes, I said tuck the chin. When you lower the chin in Shavasana, the neck will become straighter and more relaxed. If you cannot do that, you place that one of those neck pillows or whatever. So in Shavasana, you are not head up, chin up, chin slightly down, but of course make sure that you are not choking. Okay. So
where exactly am I supposed to place it on the back?
You lie down, when you lie down on the mat is flat, mat doesn't, it is completely straight,
Yeah.
You only slide your fingers, 4 fingers if you can slide in that area. If there is a gap there, that gap probably needs a support. But you can do it intelligently. As you gain little more knowledge, you can slide your legs down. See, for people with back problems, it is difficult to lie flat. I agree. So what I do is, you have to spread the legs. So, now first of all, when you are lying down, you don't just flop like this. You go like a carpet. First you go down like this, and then you try to flatten now itself. And then here, if there is any gap here. So if there is too much gap, I can put a support. But if I want to adjust without props, I just slide my hips down. Maybe widen my legs, flop my feet, now I'm more comfortable. And maybe I can even put something on my belly to straighten my lower back. Similarly, head is not like this. Back of the neck straight. And then arms one at a time. Those who are sensitive in their arms and shoulders, just slightly pull your arms down. Now, otherwise, I'm going to be like this. Lower back is all pinchy. So I need to slide one hip at a time, one leg at a time, one shoulder at a time. And then usually, Shavasana supports only if you have severe back pain or neck pain, you can. But otherwise, with your joint adjustment, you can lie down comfortably. So that's about primary and secondary curves.
I had a C-section and they put an epidural, so do you think that is the problem, or do you think I have a lack from forearm? That doesn't matter.
See, recovery is usually 100%.
Okay. So that shouldn't be the problem.
Initially, maybe you can be a little careful when you start your yoga practice. Then as you get stronger in your body and all that, then I'm sure those things will just go away. Yes. Focus on your, maybe that abdominal strengthening and this and that.
Should I go to physiotherapist or something? Not really.
I don't know. So it depends on the severity. If it is severe, unbearable burning and all that, then you may have to
Can you
go
go
to
in
a
like 2
physiotherapist.
minutes? As soon
Yes.
as I get up, it's fine.
Yes, so when you get up from Shavasana also, you don't get up straight. That's why we turn to one side and get up. And that is how in daily life also you are supposed to get up. Not just pull yourself up just like that. You turn to one side and then only you get up.
For example, I'm sitting now for so long, when I get up, it's kind of,
That's because that's not the way to get up.
That's for a minute.
Again, you jerk, you go up like that, it's going to pull your lower back. So if you're having pain and all that, for a few months at least, so when you're sitting, so I'm sitting and I want to get up. So I'm not going to come up like that. It's like a deadlift. It's like I'm lifting weight. I have to pull my whole body weight up, 60 kgs.
Okay.
So I'm going to do this, come onto my all fours, and then one foot, and then tuck the other foot, and then come up.
Okay.
No pain.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah. And similarly, lying down from bed and getting up, turn to one side and then get up.
Okay.
And then the other trick that I do is, I don't sleep right in the middle of the bed. I sleep towards the edge. So that turning to one side and getting up. Now I don't have to, if I'm in the middle of the room or something, I have to, it'll be more challenging for me to come up. And then if you're in severe pain and all, you'll have need some support.
Not really.
Yeah.
It's back in a minute.
Then next would be, breath, page 40. We're almost done. Yes. So we do this cat cow now. Inhale and exhale. Now you have to, what he's trying to say is, inhaling actually means back extension and exhaling means forward bending, flexion. So it is not as if first you inhale, then you bend back, and then you exhale and you flex forward. It is actually the breath and the spinal movement which are the same, one and the same, is what he's trying to say.
When you breathe, you cannot bend.
You do both simultaneously. As you inhale, you extend from the lower back to the neck. And as you exhale, you move from the neck to the lower back.
Yeah, that's what we're doing now. First we inhaling and then we...
That you don't do. Inhale Madvaga, you imagine that the breath is flowing upwards. And when you exhale, you imagine that the breath is going from the neck to the tailbone. And that will improve your movements also. And similarly in Surya Namaskar, though we are doing it slowly now, as you keep doing it a little faster, each half breath is one posture. Inhale 1, exhale 2. Inhale 3, then hold the breath for plank, then exhale 5. Then inhale 6, exhale 7. Inhale 8, exhale 9. Then inhale 10 and then continue. So 10 steps to Surya Namaskar that we do corresponding to each half breath. Only at one point do we hold the breath for a very brief time. Yeah, for plank. So that's what he's trying to say. Don't discriminate between spinal extension and inhalation. Spinal extension means inhalation and spinal flexion means exhalation. So there's no difference between the breath and the spinal movement. If you think of it that way, then maybe you will not get breathless during fast class. Okay, now coming to page 42, he's talking about this triangle pose Trikonasana. I don't know if you did it today with sir. Yeah? Now this Trikonasana can be all sorts of, many variations are there. Now, it's called a lateral movement because you are bending sideways. Okay? Now, if you keep your feet wide apart, it is not going to make your spine tilt sideways. You get it? Now, in this lateral bending, you want the spine, what do we want? Maybe some days you want the spine to start turning sideways like this in Trikonasana. But if you have your feet wide apart in Trikonasana, the spine is not going to turn. It is only going to stretch your waist and it is only going to maybe get the hip to stretch. But actually your spine will not start bending sideways. If you want, so it depends on what you want to achieve on that particular class. If you want a hip opening or a hip stretching class, then you can ask the student to space their legs little wider. But if you want a true lateral flexion of the spine, then you tell them to keep their feet a little closer. You only imagine and maybe you can try it out tomorrow. 2 types you can do Trikonasana. Kaal agla madkondo. Kaal agla madidre hip stretch agate. Amele waist no tone agate. If you are looking at toning your waist and making it longer and all that. On the other hand, if you want a true on that particular day, now usually we design classes depending on what is required to be achieved on that particular day. You can even theme your classes that you must be knowing. Now if you want a true lateral flexion on that day, kaal hatra irli. So you will vary, and none of these is wrong actually. So that is the one thing. Then the other thing is he is talking about is in that second figure Parivrata Trikonasana. The next this picture is about a twist. And like I said, you cannot twist. You cannot do this twist from your lower back. Please don't do it from the lower back. First of all, you cannot do lower back cannot twist that much. You start turning from the hip. And when you are turning from the hip, don't put one foot right in front of the other like you are walking a tightrope. So yesterday and day before when I showed Veerabhadrasana 1, ನಾನು ಆವಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಒಂದು ಕಾಲು ಮುಂದೆ ಇರಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕಾಲು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹಿಂದೆ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಲೆಗ್ ಸ್ಲೈಟ್ಲಿ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ದಟ್ ವೇ ಯುವರ್ ಹಿಪ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಟರ್ನ್ ಕಂಫರ್ಟಬ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ಲೆಸ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸಿಬಲ್ if your the hip can move that way even if one foot is in front of the other. See, our body is not that thin, right? It has that hip width, so you need to allow, so how you place your feet accordingly your hip will move. So first of all, when you are doing this pose, I prefer to keep my back foot little off center, but it is entirely your individual choice. If you feel you can do the tightrope feet and still turn comfortably, that's good for you. But I keep it little off center, front foot right in the middle between my hands, and then the back foot slightly to the right foot right or left foot left. That gives me more freedom to turn from the hip, and that will translate into a good twist also, a safe, stable twist. But do not try to twist from here. Another area where people try to twist, do this posture, they try to twist from the lower part of their upper back. Andre T11, T12.
Here,
Yes, above the waist they will try to twist.
but that will move now. When
It will move, yes, it will move, but see, it is always more stable to twist from the hips, more support. Otherwise, you are going to just keep twisting that T11, T12, which is much delicate, weaker. You don't need to do that, put that area into strain. Hips have that much of bone support and joint support, ligament support, so you can easily twist from there. So try not to do twisting poses from your T11, T12. And when you turn from the hip area now, it will give nicely, full trunk of the body will turn well and your chest will open. Usually these postures are used to open hips and more importantly to open chest. So if you are twisting from here, from this area, then your chest will slightly struggle. It may not open that much. Rather than if you are hinging from here. Chest agla agbeku, shoulder expand agbeku, adella hip area and the twist madidre chanag baratte. Okay? So that is about twisting. And then the final part is something called the fifth spatial. So we have learned about types of spinal movements. The first spinal movement is flexion. The movements which the spine can do. Number one is flexion, number two is extension. And flexion is the most natural movement that the spine can do. Extension takes little effort. So extension number two. Then number three is that lateral bending or side bending. Then fourth one is axial rotation or twisting. Now the fifth one, which is done in advanced yoga, is called axial extension. Now for axial extension, you require coordination between your pranayama and your yoga. You have to lock the belly, you have to lock the pelvic floor, then you have to create some pressure in the cavities, abdominal cavity and your chest cavity so that your spine will unnaturally straighten. Okay, otherwise if in any other, just an asana pose, just a physical pose, you cannot create that straightening of the spine. You have to lock your cavities, this pelvic floor, you have to lock your belly, then you have to transmit energy upwards through your breath, and then you can straighten the spine in some advanced poses, and that is called axial extension. And in axial extension, there is a reduction of primary curve and a reduction of secondary curves. All curves are taken away. And that requires a combination of bandhas, locks, abdominal lock, root lock, and it requires the asana practice, the muscular effort. So that is axial extension. Cervical, thoracic and lumbar curves are all reduced, and the result is that overall length of the spine is increased. You can just underline that. Yes, and this will not happen even in your advanced yoga class. It will happen only by practice of pranayama and asana together. And consciously you have to do this, mind is required. So it's actually a little unnatural, this, but lot of benefits are there if you can practice, if you can come to that level. The action that produces axial extension involves a shift in the tone and orientation of the breathing structures known as bandhas. 3 diaphragms, pelvic, respiratory and vocal, and their surrounding musculature becomes more stable. So there is no movement in your abdominal cavity, chest cavity. Actually breathing, you cannot, the breath becomes long and therefore your spine becomes straight. And this axial extension, you can do it in seated posture or in standing also. Bandhas you will learn, I hope, you will be learning. Pelvic floor lock is one bandha. Bandha andre lock. Okay. Bandh in Hindi is tying, locking. So the root lock they call is Moola Bandha. Are all of you, do you know where the pelvic floor is in your body?
Near the tailbone.
Maybe. In your pelvic floor there are 3 openings. Okay. I'm just going away from chapter, but I will just tell you. So your pelvic floor is approximately like this. It's a tissue, okay? Now 3 openings are there. First opening is for your urine. Okay, now those who have had babies, why babies, you pass urine and motion, you know where it is coming from. If you, at least, next time you sit in the toilet, no, I'm not joking. This one you can do as a small homework. When you sit in the toilet, you just mentally observe where you are passing urine from. Is it the front, or is it the middle, or in the back? Anterior, middle, posterior anta check ಮಾಡಿ. We don't even look at all these things till we start doing all this. So anterior is usually urine, and then middle would be your vagina, birth canal, and then posterior will be your motion, anus. Now this whole thing is suspended, these 3 openings are suspended in one tissue that is called your pelvic floor. Okay? Now when you are doing Moola Bandha, it's as if, now think that this is like this. Think, you have made tents in the US when you go camping. Have you built a tent? It will be just one round piece and then they will pull it up.
Yes.
Now your Moola Bandha is like that only. You are just pulling it up towards your navel. You are slightly holding. Now in your Kegels exercise, you would have done prenatal lamas and all that.
Yeah.
They will say bladder contraction. Here we don't do bladder. We go a little behind. Bladder illi engage madala. We try to engage this tissue, this space between the vagina and the anus, and we try to lift it up. We can make it small and we lift it up. And how to imagine that? Imagine that you are lifting the posterior part of your pelvic floor towards your navel. Andre body lengthening ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ. And usually when you do this pelvic floor lock, you have to suck in your belly also. But it's actually very delicate, it's a very subtle action. You don't have to go breathless doing it. You just go and first you see where your urine, your motion comes from, and just do a 10 count, contraction, release, hold, release, that kind of thing. But when we are doing pranayama, you will do that and you will lift it up, you will pull in your tummy and you will like that, hold your breath or retain the breath. So this, something like that is done in your axial extension. Idalla madidre, energy will travel up the spine. And spine will become straighter, abdomen gets some tone, if you want to lose belly fat and all that, like that only. And good for your bladder control, because after birth and all that, full bladder weakness agutte. and you will see that as you grow older, your bladder starts to, because of urine leak agutte. So by practicing all this, you can build a little strength, and it will definitely, I recommend an intense pranayama practice for improving your asana practice also. So this is about the root lock, Moola Bandha. Abdominal lock is Udyana Bandha. Andre, ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ ಎಲ್ಲ right and left ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ shrink ಮಾಡೋದು. Our abdominal muscle is made up of right and left joined in the middle. For various reasons we put on weight, or those pot-bellied people, or because of childbirth, the right and left muscles of the abdomen, they separate. So when we start engaging abdominal lock, everything comes back like as if you are putting back the mesh together. So that is abdominal lock or Udyana Bandha. Moola Bandha is root lock. Amele the final lock is in the throat. Throat nalli, just listen to this. This is called the Jalandhara. A hissing sound from the constricted windpipe. So you make your windpipe little narrow and you try to breathe through that narrow tube. It will create a soft sound like the ocean wave. So if you engage all these three locks and maybe retain your breath, this is what they try to do in this axial extension, and then you will learn this. Bandhas will come in your 200 hours for sure. This is a lot for today, I think. You just go over and think over it, yeah. I'll send you one video, I think, which I saw, it looked nice. It was for the spinal column, how it is parts of the cervical, thoracic. Just look at it in the evening. I'll send it later at night, maybe around 9:30, 10 or something. Just look at it for today. Read the chapter again today, before you forget, and then try to assimilate again. Sure. Okay. Bye. Thank you.